He's only had 5 career starts. He made his racehorse debut in January.
Hello and welcome back to the next episode of The Jump Show with Jake Price, Dan Overall, and not Tom Bull. Unfortunately, Tom working very hard in the Racing TV studios as we speak, so therefore I've been drafted in. Feels like I've been drafted in, for a chance crack spare ride, and then the horse is actually 66-1 given this weekend, but we'll give it a good shot. In terms of backing a couple of winners. I really hope you do enjoy the video. The videos this year have been top of the bus. No, me not being on them probably has helped very much. So if we can get to that like goal of 150 likes, actually, I think we should be going for 175 likes, because every time I've set a like goal when I've been on this podcast, it has been achieved. So don't let me down below. Jake and Dan, as I say, I've been drafted in. Brian Hughes on Chasing Fire at Doncaster, thinking on paper this looks quality, and then the horse is beaten after 100 yards.
Yeah, just missing the cheek pieces to try and get you some encouragement to go a bit better, and all of a sudden he just actually resented every single second of it. So welcome to this crack spare ride. It's like getting a ride on the big race of the day. You're happy to be here, even if you know it's probably not going to go that well.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like that I'm making up grade 1 numbers here, Jake. Look, the Ascot card, I suppose, there's a few half-decent races in there. We'll get kind of stuck into that alongside a Haydock race. Coming up to this time of the year, are you looking to kind of save a bit of money for the Christmas period and Boxing Day onwards, or do you like getting stuck into this Ascot card?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, this Ascot card is amazing, isn't it? You've got a grade 1, 2 Premier Handicaps, one a hurdle, one a chase. Like, on paper, it should be amazing. I think the ground has kind of scared a few away. The time of year, again, is some people are just saving their horses for Christmas. So, yeah, I think it's a card I'll have a few stabs at, but like most weeks in December, from the first week onwards, I'm kind of slowing it down a little bit, ready to rebuild, because it's that time of year where you just don't get the horses. It's like that week before Cheltenham or the 2 weeks before Cheltenham where there's not much going on, is there? And there's not too many good horses out. So yeah, it's a bit of a quiet period, but we're ready to get jumped back in for Boxing Day and onwards.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly have a little bit of a chat about Boxing Day right at the end of the video, so make sure to stay tuned for that. We'll move on to the recent notable performance over the last week. Some cracking action at Cheltenham last week, guys. Dan, coming to you, is your kind of horse coming from Cheltenham, or like yourself, you do like to go away from the curve, usually?
Yeah, usually it'll be somewhere at Hereford or something that I thought was a really eye-catching 7th and will be one for a Class 5 handicap. But no, we're actually going to a horse I put up as a handicapper to follow last season, and we never saw him, which is the tradition with horses I generally speak about. They do tend to mysteriously disappear once I utter their name. But Bo Zenith came out for the first time up for Nicky Henderson, and I thought was probably the most obvious eye-catcher you'd seen, that he was basically last turning for home, sprinted home to finish 3rd in that 2-mile handicap. We know it was dominated from Mirabad at the front. This is a horse I've always liked, and I think he's shown he still retains all that ability. He's still a very young horse, as we know. You look at that grade 1 at Aintree. Obviously, he was only beaten a short head by Zenta, who's now rated 143. He was giving her £7. Nuzrat is 5 lengths down as well. He was rated 137. Bo Zenith went up £3 for this run to a mark 138. I still think there's plenty of upside there. And I think Nick Henderson ran Doddy the Great in that handicap last year. I imagine he might follow a very similar route in that he'll probably go to the Betfair hurdle and then maybe step up in trip. I do think he's crying out for 2.5 miles. Obviously, Doddy the Great ended up going off fairly short for the Coral Cup. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they go a very similar route with him. But still a horse I like, seems to retain all his ability. And I still think there's plenty of upside there from that mark 138.
Yeah, Bo Zenith for Dan, who was obviously very eye-catching in what was a funny race. Jake, come to yourself. Who have you put up?
Yeah, speaking of bad rides, I have another one, and that is Joyeuse for Nicky Henderson. Obviously, I put her up as a bet for last weekend. Probably ended up being one of my strongest fancies going into it. I mean, she tanked into the race, and for some reason, De Boinville just couldn't get her to go in a straight line. She met so much trouble in running, switch left, switch right, switch back, left again. I mean, everything that went wrong could have gone wrong, did go wrong. And she ended up beaten just under 2 lengths by Woodhoo, who, to be fair to Woodhoo, she did, win it well from the front. She got a much clearer run, and she's the type of horse that you'd want to finish behind, I think. Like, that juvenile form from last season looks really, really good. Keeps on getting boosted, time on time on time. She's the type of horse in the race that I would have wanted her to finish second to. She split her and taken her chances. Another really nice mare for the Skeltons. So, yeah, I thought it was a really good run. She's got up £4 to a mark of 123. Had she got a better ride, I think she could have won it. She didn't. So, we'll take that going forward. And I think that she's still a very well handicapped horse.
Yeah, definitely can see that. My one would come from Fairy House myself, actually. A horse called Kinter Calanisi, who was just pipped in the rated novice chase. I don't know how he didn't win the race, to be honest. He was stargazing up the run-in, idling away, and ended up getting pipped by Judicious Alain. Had some nice hurdle form at the back end of last season. I think he's rated 126 over hurdles. I'd say he'll go in of a pretty similar mark when going into handicap company probably next time out for Tom Gibney. I just think he's a real Navan Nace type of horse. There's a 3 mile novice handicap chase that's pretty lucrative in February, March time. There's good races at the back end of the season. I'd be very, very surprised if this horse can't win one of those races. He's better left-handed. He jumped out to his left at Fairy House, so I'd like to see him back left-handed. I think he should be winning, maybe with a slightly more well-timed ride. We'll move in to the preview of this weekend's action, and we'll move to Ascot, where there's 4, as Jake has alluded to, on paper, very good races. We'll start off with the Graduation Chase. Low on numbers, only 4 of them in there. But Dan, this is actually a really good little 4-runner race. Like, if you slapped a Grade 2 name beside this, it wouldn't look particularly out of place.
Yeah, I'd argue that's probably about right, but let's just thank you to the Irish again. Obviously, you've stepped in last minute for us, and the Irish have stepped in here to actually make this a race and not a walkover. Obviously, we've got one British runner in this race, and indeed, if we kind of know they're plodding backwards from the Grand Nationals. So, I mean, you've got to question really what he's going to be there to really achieve. I say this is really trappy. I wouldn't be getting massively stuck in. I thought Jungle Boogie was probably the overpriced one at 7-2, like almost the outsider of the field. Obviously, only 4 starts over fences. He's 10 years old. He's been littered with issues. Obviously, we know on his day he is very good. Obviously, he won the New Year's Day chase at Tremor, giving Classic Getaway £7, and then went off 16-1 for the Gold Cup. Now, I don't think any horse in here would go off anywhere near that short for a race of that caliber. And he actually went really well through it. Like, he looked like he was probably going to finish 4th when they turned for home. He pecked on landing at the 3rd last, still going pretty well, just tired late on there into 6th. That was a really standout performance, I think, in the context of this race. I don't think they're really necessarily hiding anything with this horse anymore. Like, he's 10. They're just trying to win races with him. He's still extremely lightly raced. Obviously, Aroko is the favourite. I think you do just have to be concerned with the idea that this isn't the main event for him. They're very much working backwards from April. And I thought 7-2 for Jungle Boogie for a horse who shaped really well in a Gold Cup. I thought the fact that he was borderline the outsider of the 4 was just the wrong price.
Yeah, I can understand that, Jake. Would you be in a similar boat to Dan on Jungle Boogie?
He's very interesting. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting race. Obviously, you've got the trio of runners in here. They're all very closely matched on ratings, and with the weight situation, they're pretty much matched on that as well. There's only £3 penalties to 2 of them. So, yeah, it's a very interesting race. I think my overriding point is that I don't want to see Hiroko winning this in terms of my Grand National shout for him. I think the plan was to go to the Cotswold next, so it's interesting that they decided to come here. I guess, with the ratings, it makes sense. They're all pretty similar rating. If he comes 2nd or 3rd, he's not going to be going up much, or if anything at all. I just don't want to see him winning it, because if you get another £7 on top of that 152, I don't think he's starting to look as well handicapped as he does right now. So yeah, that would be my overriding point. I think if you force me to pick one, I'd probably go Phil Dodge just. I think he's a very nice horse. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet since he switched to the Robcourse Silks. Obviously, he won that 2-runner race the other day. Hopefully, that'll boost his confidence a bit. Obviously, it means absolutely nothing in terms of form, but it should put him spot on for this. So, yeah, it'd be a close race. I probably won't be having a bet, to be honest, but Fildor would be the one I'd go with if I was forced to have a bet.
Yeah, it looks like a bit of a watching brief for me, I must say. Very, very good little race, but very hard to know who wants what out of it, as you say, with Iroko and likely marks and stuff like that in the future. We'll move on to the Grade 1, the Long Walk Hurdle. I was obviously devastated as Kerry Hill's biggest fan that he wasn't declared. I think he actually might have ran all right in this race, but he hasn't been declared. There's 8 in there. No surprises given the 3 mile division in England at the moment. It is not a particularly deep race in my eyes. Strong leader. I wouldn't really be a massive fan of him around Ascot, but I'm looking at this race, Jake, and I'm really struggling to find a horse that's actually going to beat him.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because he's the deserving favourite on all known form, but he's had one start in his 13 race career right-handed, got beat when he threw away the the Coral Hurdle last year. So that is my only concern. There's obviously a reason why they've run him 12 times left-handed and once right-handed, and obviously since that right-handed run, they haven't run him this way around. So that's the big stick you can poke him with, and that's what I will be going with because I think the Wall Park is the bet in here. I think that as much as he's a horse coming from handicaps, that's exactly what Cranbo did when he won this last year. Paisley Park has done that in the past as well. Like the staying hurdle division is not good enough for a top end handicapper not to be able to be competitive, and I think that's exactly what he is. And the best thing I think as well is that since he's won that Potemps final, obviously bolted up at Cheltenham, obviously JP McManus has come in and bought him. Like, I don't think he would be buying a horse like this if he didn't think there was more to come, or was being told anyway that there's more to come by the right people. So I think that's a big boost of confidence that he can go on. He's already rated 152, which puts him, £6 below strong leader as it stands, and strong leader won a grade 2 last time out. So yeah, I think the Wall Park 7-2, that's the one I want to be chancing just because he could really develop into a top staying hurdler that could end up being a Cheltenham contender come March just because the division is so weak.
Yeah, hard to disagree with that, Dan. He's the horse on the improve out of this lot. I know we talked a little bit kind of off camera about Strong in the last couple of weeks, and I suppose where he parked in front, he almost jumped into the stand at 2 out. It would have to harbour some concerns. Is there anything else in there? Hidden Valley Lake was third to strong leaders at Aintree. Shoot First won at Haydock in the big handicap there. I suppose there is a bit of form to be taking him on with.
There were some reasonable options. I guess the makeup of the race and the fact we've managed to get at least 10 runners. I mean, it was 8 runners, I think, now. We've got each way terms available at least. So it maybe suggests something, and an each way price would be the play in a race where, let's be honest, there probably isn't all that much between them on what we know. As you say, I can't forgive Strong Leader what he did at Ascot last year, mainly because I backed him when he was the outside of the field, got punted in, the race was there, and he just thought, no. This is not, we don't do winning here around right-handed tracks. No, so I really do struggle to forgive him that. I was desperate to take him on last time. I mean, well done. He beat Mon Morale. Round of applause for you. It means really very little in the context of this. Handicappers can improve and win this. We know Paisley Park, obviously, it was one of those. Sam Spinner went from that Haydock race to win. So Shoot First, there's plenty of precedence for Shoot First being able to kick on. Obviously, that win seemingly a bit unexpected. The fact he went off 22-1. So I think you maybe question, obviously, then going back onto a quicker surface, whether that's going to be ideal. It's probably not a race I will have a bet on, but the one I probably would go with as an each way option would be Blue King Daru, who is not a horse I've ever really liked. I thought he was pretty overhyped a lot of last season because obviously he was a 4-year-old. He won a nothing 4-year-old race and then kind of just did keep solidly improving. Obviously, he was only 5th in this last year. But to his credit, he was only a 4-year-old then. He was pretty keen. He had no cover. I don't think the form of last year's race is particularly good, which is, again, I'm really having to convince myself of his claims here, I have to admit. Even as I'm talking it out loud, it's like, am I sure I really want to go down this path? But I just thought around the 10-1 mark, he was fair enough. Like, obviously, he did have a setback after this race last year. Then he went to Sandown after 4 months off. You could really argue giving away weight all round there. That was probably a career best over a trip shorter than ideal. He's clearly probably still one of the more obvious improving horses. And I would say this has always been kind of the plan. Obviously, he had the run last time out in a very slowly run race over 2.5. That wouldn't have suited him, as we know. I don't think he has any issues with this ground. Obviously, all his best form tends to be on a quicker surface. I still think he has upside. Now, I don't think he's going to necessarily even get involved in the stayers hurdle picture. But I don't think you really have to be of that quality to win this. I really do think it's a middling race. Say Blue King Daru at 10-1 would be the play if I was going to have a bet in the race, but probably more of a watching brief and a damning indictment for the staying hurdling division in this country still.
Well, those who watch Let's Talk Racing will know that I've come on this podcast to escape Josh's Blue King Daru propaganda. Here I'm being hit.
I wouldn't call that. If that was propaganda, then it was a really light touch. I was struggling like hell to get through that.
Putting his name in the lips is even enough propaganda for me not to enjoy it. But look, Blue King Daru potentially has an each way chance. I will be sitting this race out, to be honest, because I do think Strong Leader is the best of the lot of them, but I wouldn't be going near him at that type of price around Ascot. Personally, move on to the Howden Silver Cup, should I say. Only the 8 runners again. We'll probably get onto it when we're talking about the Tommy Whittle, but having 2 Premier 3-mile handicap chases on the exact same day does, well, I don't know who's doing that and why they're doing it. We've got Victorino at the top of the betting. I unfortunately am probably not in a good place to talk about Victorino because Charlie Deutsch is absolutely winding me up this year. Every time I back him, he is powder puff. He's letting horses go by him. He's looking like he's getting horses to thump fences. And every time I back against him, he looks like the magician that he sometimes can look like. Dan, I backed Victorino at Newbury, and I don't know how he came third. Because I actually walked out. I was at Ferriers. I walked out of the Boyle Sports because the race was done. And somehow I looked at the Racing Post 10 minutes later and he finished third. Does he win at Ascot because he loves Ascot? Or can we take him on with something else?
I think the fact that it's such a small field would lend you to believe that he could probably just win this. Because, I mean, you really do have to be forgiving of not just Newbury, but then you go back to the Ultima as well. He didn't jump a fence in either of his last 2 races. Like, he's jumped abysmally. Obviously, those are bigger fields, probably more competitive races. If that can help him now back at Ascot, well, we know, I mean, Ascot's a stiff jumping track, so it's a bit weird that he was able to ping round Ascot and then all of a sudden struggle elsewhere. So that's a bit of an enigma in its own right. He is getting a bit temperamental, it would seem, but he has the form credentials to win this pretty easily. This is just a very strange race, isn't it? I mean, Trelawney is a horse I've now quite warmed to after last time out. I really did have question marks about his temperament, but last time I've put those to bed. They've always thought he was a good horse, but now coming here just seems a bit of a strange bit of placement up to a mark 152. Obviously, the changing man, I just have to laugh. He got out-battled by Frero Bamboo, which is just superb. I mean, please abandon ship, people. I can't stress this enough. So the horse I'm going to have to probably side with is because I probably jumped the gun with him earlier in the season. He's Phlegmatic. Now, I say I did jump the gun earlier this season. I was always conscious that because he didn't have his cheek pieces on, because it was a bit early in the season, there was a chance he just wouldn't have been off, and he was never put in the race. He shaped perfectly well, and now he's been dropped £8 in free runs this season. He's now £3 below his last winning mark, which came on his 4th start of last season. This is now his 4th start. He beat Chianti Classico at Kempton there. He's £3 below when he was only 4 lengths third in this race last season. Behind Victorino, and he's £4 better off for Victorino. And crucially, the headgear does go back on after being off at every start this season. I mean, you go back to the first time cheek pieces were on, he was a very narrow second in the big handicap chase. It's always just hard to know what the target would have been with him because it's very much been building him up slowly, so it would seem. But he's handicapped to win in a race where I look at many horses. I'm not really sure if they're handicapped to win a race, like 3 under through 5, 2 for gold. They're surely weighted to their absolute best. Whereas at least with Phlegmatic, we know conditions are pretty much ideal for him. It's either Ascot or Kempton, 3 miles, decent ground, cheek pieces back on, Harry Skelton on, and he's 14, 16 to 1 in a 8-runner race. Like, I thought that was probably generous enough, and it wouldn't surprise me at all to see that price contract quite substantially.
So Phlegmatic for Dan. Jake, I know myself and yourself were on the changing man a couple of times this season to great disappointment. I felt actually quite bad earlier in the year where I slightly stoked Dan's goals about the JPR1 Jello race at Exeter. But after the changing man ran at Newcastle, I now harbour absolutely no regrets whatsoever for those. Because apparently I was wrong to back a horse that was an absolute snip and for some reason went on the inside. Are you with Dan that we have to put him now in the bin, or is he going to actually fall in one of these races?
I mean, he might win one day, but I will be stopping backing now.
Veterans chases are the play. Give it 3 years.
Copperhead is it?
I mean, it is interesting that Sam Twiston-Davies is aboard. If there's a one jockey that you'd want just to absolutely give him everything and see what he's really made of, it's going to be Sam, isn't it? So we will
I
finally
can tell
see
you what
what
he's made of. It's soft. It's
exactly.
soft stuff.
If he's soft in the finish again under Sam Twiston-Davies, then you know it's an absolute no-hoper going forward. But yeah, no, I wouldn't be with him. I think Victorino is the one I want to be with. It's just his price of 9-4, 2-1, that really doesn't inspire, does it, in a Premier handicap? But then again, now we've only got the 8 runners. I think that there's a strong case to be made for him. Obviously, he was the winner of this race last year off a mark of 142, so he's only £1 higher. He also ran in February and went off 2-1 favourite, so I guess around the same sort of price for a very similar race in February. That day he kind of just got outpaced. I think going left-handed at Cheltenham in the on trials day where he went round over 2.5, that really did like derail his season. Because he returned to Ascot, but he was all out of sorts. Like he was beaten leaving the back, managed to stay on for fourth. That was off a mark of 146. He's obviously £3 lower than that as well. I think he is just a better horse going right-handed. Obviously, that run in at Newbury was really good in the end, just to be able to stay on as he did. Hopefully, that puts him bang on for this, and that would give him a very strong winning chance of this mark of 143. So yeah, the price isn't very inspiring, but I do think that he is the most likely winner.
Yep, no, I can see that. I think a little bit in Dan's camp, just considering some of these horses that are in kind of the middle of the betting wouldn't inspire much to me. I think Heart or Dark's being a little bit slept on. Obviously, arguably needs a fair bit softer ground to this, but I don't think he's actually that dissimilar to Yeah Man, who was very close second in this race last year. So I just think at 20-1, he's overpriced for what he is. We'll move on to the big handicap hurdle, the 2 mile handicap hurdle. We have Dice Ardinos in there. Be aware, plenty of the Greatwood form on offer here. A lot of them will reappear against each other many times. Dan, out of that Greatwood form, obviously Be Aware was the closer. Dice Ardinos travelled through the race, probably like the best horse. Do you think it's coming from those two, or is there something further down the list we should be looking at?
I mean, this is probably the one race that stood up reasonably well. Of the others, we've been very much rightly snippy about who's participating. This, I think, is a decent handicap and is worthy of the Premier title. Look, to me, I've been a fan of Be Aware. Obviously, he was a handicapper to follow of mine coming into the season. He has now gone up £9. Obviously, I got 7 for the Greatwood. He got raised 2 before that for collateral form. He didn't get that £2 rise. He might have won the Greatwood, but there we are. I really do like him as a horse, but my concern is the same as it was in the Greatwood. This is just shy of 2 miles. It's on decent ground. It's sharp enough. We know Ascot tends to favour those towards the head in terms of a run style. Is he going to be well positioned enough to capitalise? I do think he could still win races up 137. I do think he's probably a graded novice chaser of the future. It's just, can he hold his position like it was in the Greatwood, or is he going to be flashing home late again, as he did at Sandown, as he did in the Greatwood? That would be my concern. I do think it's a deep race. Again, if I was going to have a bet, it would be Aware, because I just do think he's got so much scope. But it's really competitive, this. And again, it's like a lot of these races this weekend. I will happily watch it and I'll enjoy watching this one, but I wouldn't have an overly strong opinion on from a betting perspective.
I do have a question for you, Dan. How can certain horses, in your eyes, have 4 or 5 twos beside their name and you would absolutely kill them? And you've got a horse like this that got to Burdett Rhodes' girth in the Greatwood and parked, and yet he's fine.
I think parked is harsh. I think if you look at the way that race was,
he got there.
He didn't park. Burdett Road was out in front the entire way, and the finish was pretty quick. And Be Aware's the only horse that can make any ground from off the pace.
When they passed me, my dad, and Jake, which, as you know, where we stand at Cheltenham, there's 200 yards left, and he came to win the race there, and then wasn't anywhere closer at the line.
No, because Burdett Road found more for a horse who'd literally made all at a steady pace with a horse we know with short stamina for that kind of trip.
Flying home in second.
He's only had 5 career starts. He made his racecourse debut in January. Yeah, and now look, from Sandown he came from off the pace when it's nearly impossible to do so. He finished second at Kansas over 2 mile 5, where they were trying to test his stamina for that kind of trip. And Kansas obviously won a big 2.5 mile handicap at Aintree earlier this season. He's been second in the Greatwood, coming from off the pace in a race where nothing made any ground. Like, if he can keep doing this over and over again, I'll give you a point. But for a horse who's had 5 starts, made his racecourse debut at the start of the year, and you're giving out that he's a shirker this early, I think that's very harsh. I'd say overly harsh, even by your
No,
snippy, cynical
I'm
standards.
I am snippy and cynical, I get that. But what I can't comprehend is some of your logic. And I do get it to a certain degree. But if we're playing devil's advocate here, the changing man fell halfway at Winchester and went down the wrong side at Newcastle. Like, if you're going to make your excuses, then you can't call one a shirker and one not a shirker.
Well, one was beaten by a graded level flat horse off a hurdles rating of 133. The other was beaten by Frero Bamboo, who has never stayed 3 miles ever. Even getting a lift in the back of a lorry wouldn't stay 3 miles, and he's somehow been battled by that. And again, the changing man has had 18, 19 starts under rules, and won his handicaps off marks like 95, 102, 109.
But
I mean,
you're making it out though that Frero Bamboo's rated 110. I know he doesn't like to win, but be aware was second to Helnwine, who equally hates winning. We were
again,
at Sandown. Booster Bob outbattled him.
Oh, that was a dreadful race, and we all know it. He was clearly. Well, Choose a Copper came out and won. Helmvine's looked half decent. He wasn't given a great. Also, how are you writing off Helmvine? He's had 2 starts since.
Because he went to Warwick, parked when he got in front, and then was 4 for 5 in a Mickey Mouse race at Windsor.
Yeah, again, a sprint where he was off the pace, so that didn't benefit him. Why? You've convinced me that so many horses that ties in with Be Aware, they're all shirkers. How have you managed to convince yourself? They're all like 5, 6 races in their careers.
For one horse and one rule for another. And
one horse is a staying handicap chase who's had 20 runs. One's a lightly raced hurdler. Very different beasts.
It is changing man justice. Jake, show some reason in this 2-mile hurdle debate and tell me the winner.
I would love to. It is a very tricky race. Secret Squirrel is obviously the one that I would love to be with here, but why is he 5-1, like 6-1
That's
in one place?
Price.
It's an ordinary.
It's such a bad price. Like, if he was like an 8-1 shot, I'd be all over him as an each way bet in this race because he's going to be, so much better off at the weights with Be Aware. He's had that run at Ascot at the beginning of the season. Okay, it wasn't the best, but he stayed on into third. Hopefully he would come forward for that. I think he's purely priced up on the fact that Not So Sleepy won this race twice for connections. I think that must be the only reason he's so short. And if he drifts out to, like an 8-1 type price on the day, I will get involved. But I just can't see how you can back him at 5-1. I think that is terrible. But Favour and Fortune is another one in here who, if you knew he was, fully fit and ready to go, 141 does not do him justice. I think he's much better than that. Obviously, he won the Scottish Champion Hurdle off a mark of 138, which was a hell of a performance. He's only gone up £3 for it. Like that surely means that he's a very well handicapped horse still. Obviously, the Greatwood was the early season target. He got cast in his box, so ended up missing that. He's only just coming back now. Obviously, he was entered last weekend. They decided to wait for this weekend instead. I think the main problem is that the Betfair Hurdle is his one of his big targets. The county hurdle will be another target on the agenda as well. So are they going to be gunning him for this weekend? I doubt it. But if he's currently around 12-1, I think that's a decent enough price for him. But yeah, they're the two that I mainly had. I think Cabral de Matan, I think he kind of ruined his mark, as I've mentioned before, for the Sandown race when he was going to run there. And then between Dysart Enos and Be Aware, I don't think there's too much between them, but both of them are short enough prices for a big competitive handicap like this. And I guess Steel Ally is probably worth a mention as well. Like, he was absolutely mustard at Haydock the other day. He drops back in trip because they were worried about the trip at Haydock, especially on that softer ground, but he obviously seemingly did it really well. I think up to a mark of 143, that would probably be the biggest question mark for him, but he does have Dylan Johnson taking those £3 off again, so he's on one of those very progressive form lines with lump sum. Like, both of those just keep on going strength to strength to strength, so you'd have to be, positive about that, and I guess 12-1 is a big enough price to take your chance. But yeah, it's one of those races where, like, you can make a case for all of them. Secret Squirrel would be the one that I would love to be on, but as I said, the price is just terrible.
I think he'll drift surely. He can't stay that price because I think it'll be all Be Aware, it'll be all Dysart Enos, I'd say, and then maybe like Favour and Fortune get trimmed. I don't think anyone's rushing to back Secret Squirrel at barely an each way price, surely.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I'd be very surprised if you weren't able to get 8-9-1 on the day about him. Last chance saloon for me with Dysart Enos, to be honest. I won't back her again if she can't win on Saturday. I thought she travelled through the Greatwood like the best horse in the race and got tired. I'm willing to just about forgive that, but there will be no forgiveness if she can't win on Saturday because there's no excuse. She should be fit. They'll ride her differently. I think they'll come with a late run. I know that might not suit around Ascot, but this horse should be winning one of these races. That's just plain and simple. And I will be taking her to win the handicap hurdle. We'll move to Haydock pretty briefly. The Tommy Whittle is the only race we're going to look at in depth. And this is a fantastic time where I can sit back and revel in Jake Price's famous bridge propaganda.
He just wins this, doesn't he? Like, it is a very ordinary field. We've got 9 runners, and he's top weight off 137, which I think that says quite a lot about a Class 2 handicap. As you said, already mentioned, like, why do we have to have this and the Silver Cup on the same day? If they were all in one race, it'd be a lovely race. But anyway, we've got the two. Yeah, famous bridge. I just think he's a great bet. Obviously, he won this race last year. That was off a mark of 135, so he's only £2 higher, despite having run 4 times since. He was 4th in the Ultima on his last start of the season, where he'd probably be a bit over the top at that point. He'd danced many dances before that point. Ran really well, stayed on for 4th. That's absolutely fine. But it was his run at Kelso at the beginning of the season that really thought that he was going to be, ready for one of these big handicaps back at Haydock this season. That was behind Elvis Mail, who's obviously rated 149. He's a good horse in his own right, but it was the way that Famous Bridge just kind of plugged on, was never really put into the race properly, but he plugged on into second that day. I thought it was a really good prep for the race in November here. Obviously, they ended up skipping that, and they're going to come to this one instead. But to be fair to Connections, it looks a much weaker race, so they've kind of made the right decision on that front. Off a mark of 137, Sean Quinlan obviously retained his ride as he always does. Impressive Quinlan. And yeah, I just don't think there's many that can really get to him, his sort of level. I think Frenchy Delage maybe would be the biggest danger I'd have, but he's another horse who has lots of seconds next to his name, so Dan won't be very happy about him.
No, well, Dan.
No, apparently I should be a supporter. It depends on my perspective, apparently.
Well, it depends whether he's been on the Dan's Racing TV column or not, whether this horse is actually just a really well handicapped horse. It depends on that. Now, Dan, James Owen has done miraculous things since starting training, but if he gets East Street to win a Tommy Whittle, it will far, far supersede anything he's done before.
Yeah, I mean, it has been pretty miraculous. Again, he's now proving he can do it with any kind of horse. Obviously, he has all the juveniles. He's had these kind of like well-handicapped hurdlers who we got from the Skeltons of the early days we did well with. That was impressive. Now to get these Sue Smith cast-offs and get them to win sequences over fences and hurdles. I mean, a horse who more often than not just decides he hates racing and never travels a yard, and he's now racking up sequences. Doesn't seem feasible. I think this is a bridge too far, realistically. I think there were signs in even his last run that it's kind of coming towards the end of his rope a little bit. Like he wasn't going through that last race that sweetly. I think it was almost because it was such a poor race, he won it in the end. So yeah, I'd be of the opinion that this is probably a step too far. I know it isn't the best of races, as we mentioned, but I mean, it's still got far more quality than the last few he's been in. And I tried to look for something against Famous Bridge almost out of spite. To be honest, I couldn't find anything. So I'll have Famous Bridge, and I'll be cheering for you. Let's put it that way. After a lot of head-to-heads, we'll have a coming together moment, and I'll keep you in my heart as I watch it.
Oh, finally, some goodwill on this Christmas.
It will be through Clinched Fest. Like, if he's... I'm happy for you.
Yeah, smiling through the anger.
Indeed.
Yeah, no, it doesn't look a vintage Tommy Whittle. Look, anything else on the weekend? It doesn't look like a weekend that's full of betting opportunities. And I suppose the Christmas entries are out for the 26th and 27th. Anything that's particularly caught the eye, Dan?
So we were initially going to preview the Mayor's Novice Hurdle listed race because that was on the schedule. And then basically every interesting horse who was entered in it decided not to go. So I'm not sure if it's even on ITV anymore. And I think it's been moved to 12:55. So the powers that be not exactly impressed with the text on that one. But it's I'd say it is an interesting race from a pace angle because this is going to be heavy ground. I mean, it's already soft heavy in places at Haydock. There's a bit more rain coming. 2 mile 3, that very lightly raced mares. Like this could be pretty testing. And you've got 3 front runners in here. Like from here to eternity, he's been making all quite experienced. You've got Kayla Wood, who was very, very keen last time out and just set our fight in front. Is 2 mile free on heavy ground, really going to suit. You've got My Kiwi Girl, who was also really pushing it for last time out. So I think there's potential for a bit of a pace burn up here. Now, Holloway Queen is the interesting one. And I know Nick Henderson won this with a 4-year-old last year in Power Puri, but I'd be concerned with a lightly racehorse like Holloway Queen and these conditions from that yard. Like, they don't tend to be their ideal conditions. And Power Puri had loads of flat form and ran as a juvenile. So I do think they're very different types. And that kind of led me to Millie Supreme, who only has a rating of 110. But I don't think it's going to necessarily be a case of having to be that good to win this. I think she could just benefit from what would be an overly strong pace out front. And this mare is a proper stayer with experience. Like she ran in multiple point-to-point. She won 3 times in that sphere on soft and heavy ground. She gave Bill Joyce a decent enough race. I mean, she isn't in that horse's caliber, but the only horse to get anywhere near that at Carlisle, when obviously Bill Joyce went on to win that Grade 2 at Sandown emphatically. Good ground last time out, I thought, against Dame of the Cotswolds, who's just been making hay in these good ground events, are very progressive. Just couldn't live with her turn of foot that day, but travelled pretty well into the race. I do think just sitting off a really strong pace over this kind of trip on testing ground, it might just almost fall into a lap. And obviously, it might be one of those days where we're going to need a teak tough horse, and we've got teak tough Hughes on board. So I think she'll be a big price. She could well be like 10-1 in a 5-runner race because of the domination of the Nick Henderson favourite. If she's that kind of price, I think she's worth a little bet because of the way the race may pan out from a pace perspective.
Well, you're getting back in my good book, Stan. A bit of Brian Hughes propaganda never goes amiss. Jake,
I'm tickling your belly.
You are tickling my belly. Keep tickling. Jake, on Saturday, anything else?
Yeah, I've got one for Saturday in the 2:13 at Hereford. Namian Lion is in there. Obviously, he ran at Sandown the other day just to get his season started. That was off a mark of 150. He's quite generously dropped £2 for finishing second to Knickerbocker Glory, who obviously just had ideal conditions and ran away with the race. But I thought it was a decent performance from Namian Lion in second, ran on well at the finish. And yeah, now he's been dropped down £2. They're trying 2.5 miles again with him, which I don't mind as an angle. I thought he ran really well in the Lanzarote when he just got touched off by JJ Riley. So this looks a much weaker race. I don't know what type of price he'll be, but I thought that he had a nice winning chance. And then, yeah, we'll have a quick peek at some Christmas racing. Obviously, we're recording this before the weekend, so we've only got the Irish entries so far, and obviously the early closers in England, which I'll touch on in a minute. I don't think we're going to have time to fit in a proper Boxing Day podcast, unfortunately, this season. So I'll just chuck a couple bets up now so that we've got them in the book. But I thought that Mercia had a really good chance in the Grade 2 juvenile hurdle on Boxing Day or Stephen's Day over at Leopardstown. Like, I was looking at the race conditions, and she's a listed hurdle winner, but because of the race conditions, you only get penalised if you won a Grade 3. So she doesn't have any penalties to carry despite being a listed winner. She's already had 4 starts over hurdles. If she can develop into the type of horse that, the Cargises, the Gala Marceaus have over the years, then she could be a really nice, mare in this. Willie DeHull has currently been installed as the 6-4 favourite, and I know, Andrew, you absolutely hate Willie DeHull. So
I haven't seen that price. I know he's in there. I didn't expect him to be that short, but okay.
Yeah, so she's in at 3-1 second fab, which I think is fair. I think another one actually who's been put in at a really nice price is it's Bilbo, the Henry Bromhead horse. He's in at 10-1, which I think again would be a nice each way play against the
That's because Willie DeHull's lapped him already in France and proven he's the top class juvenile of the season.
If I speak, I'm
this
in
is true.
So.
I demand you to bite on my bait.
But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see these French horses out in the juvenile division. So that will be one bet. If we go over to the 20, one other on the 26th, it's not obviously entered yet, but if Spillane Tower does get put into the King George at Kempton, then I will be very interested in him. They were talking about needing soft ground for him, which there's going to be quite a bit of rain over the weekend, I think, so that we might end up getting enough. But the supplementary stage is going to be tomorrow, Friday, so the day this podcast comes out. So we'll find out then if he is put in or not. If he's put in, I think that he would have a really nice chance there, and he'd be the one I'd want to be with. Then I've got 2 for the 27th. So the Bioluminescence is in the Grade 2 Mares Novices Chase at Limerick. I think she's a really nice mare. She's really built for chasing. She did well last season. She ended up picking up a Grade 3 over hurdles, but I think chasing's going to be a game. 2 miles, 6.5 furlongs at Limerick on what usually ends up being bottomless ground over Christmas. I think that would be absolutely ideal conditions for her. She could be anything is in the race, so obviously she would be installed as the favourite just by
I think
default. But
you're also missing a very, very good mare in that race, Jake, that's just down that list.
Oh dear.
Kilteely Park.
Worker.
I mean, she would have each way claims. Should we put it that way?
I think she could come third. Yeah.
But I think bioluminescence is going to be. Yeah. I think bioluminescence is going to develop into a proper graded mare, so she would be the one I'd want to.
And
be
Kilteely Park won't. Insulting.
Unfortunately, not all of Paul Nolan's horses can develop into graded animals, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Damn.
The last bet, though. The last bet I want to raise, though, is in the Paddy Power Chase, and this is going to be Andrew's favourite horse.
Oh, Jesus, no, I know who this is.
3-card Bragg is there in the handicap. He's going to need some rain, so I think I did check the weather in Dublin, and there's going to be some rain over the weekend, just like Kempton. Hopefully there's enough for him.
He doesn't need rain. To be
but he's off a mark. He's off his mark of 148. He has to be well handicapped. Maybe this weekend won't be. This week won't be the day. But he's had his prep run over hurdles. He's going back over fences. His last run was third behind Spurland's Tower and Monty's Star, which is obviously looking unbelievable form. If he can put it all together in a big handicap, maybe it'll be the Fiestes. But I'm going to be backing him for this anyway, around 10-1.
Surely you've got to be on side now because obviously he's got Sander Clegane form.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was even behind Xander Clegane, who jumped hurdles at Clonmel like I would attempt to jump hurdles.
So you're a fan of that one then?
Yeah. I don't know. I could make peace with you putting him up for the Thyestes. I cannot make peace.
Yeah, it might be one.
Because the ground's going to be too lively. Like he's slow.
I'll be keeping an eye on the ground. It's currently good to yielding. Depends how much rain, obviously, they end up getting. If it got to soft, I'd give him a chance. But obviously,
I'm not sure there's all that much on how that's looked.
Yeah, it might be far-fetched.
It might just maintain.
Yeah, well,
what's your best bet at Christmas then, Andrew? Come on, give us the people what they want.
Look with 3-card Bragg. I'm going to Thurles on Saturday to try and boost some of the Christmas coffers. With Brave Fortune in the 305, Pat Doyle's horse. He was quite eye-catching at Fairyhouse the last day over 2-4. I don't think it's that deep a race, to be honest. He seems to be an improving horse. His jumping is getting better time and time again. So hopefully he'll get the business done. And we don't have the entries for the 29th of December, but if the people want a Christmas winner, they need to go to the 0-109, 2 miles, 6 furlong, handicap chase at Limerick, usually the second race on the card, and look for either Silver King or Junior Rattler in the entries. Either of them win, they'll go very, very close. In fact, I'll actually just say it, they will win.
All right, okay. Now you've hedged your bets with having 2 in there, just in case. I mean, the other day you were pretty sure 1 was going to run, and now it's like, ooh, what if the other one goes?
I'm just giving the options for people, just in case. I think Silver King is very much the obvious one because he had a prep run the last day over 2-1, needs further, and is well handicapped of 107. If Bushman's Pass, I was absolutely salivating at the declarations. So, did you see Kalanisi's Star is back entered? Like the good times are back.
The good times will be back until 5 minutes after the off time, and then there will be bad times, I would suggest.
Yeah, no, the good times won't last too long. But anyway, we've digressed on long enough. Hopefully you have a lovely Christmas and back a couple of winners this weekend in preparation for the Christmas period. It's been great to be on. Thanks for having me, lads. Hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let's get a big push towards 3,000 before the Cheltenham Festival. And of course, comment down below your best bet for the Christmas period. There'll be plenty of content after Christmas, including, I believe, the return of the Cheltenham Ante-Post series. So something to really look forward to. Thanks again to the 2 lads for having me on. I'll see you again very soon.